Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched No Time to Die. Let's talk about it. So No Time to Die is the final entry into Daniel Craig's run as James Bond. Now, this long-awaited film was supposed to come out 200 years ago, but unfortunately, because of the panoramic, because of the whole situation going on in the world, we only ended up getting this film this past Friday. Now, it actually landed in the UK slightly earlier than in the US, I believe, and actually, I thought we would be getting Venom this week. I thought we'd be getting Venom. I was getting ready for some Tom Hardy Venom action, but then I found out there was actually going to be No Time to Die this week, and I was like, oh. I guess though, to be fair, we ended up with the better deal because apparently Venom ain't that great. It hasn't been getting the best reviews from what I've seen, and I will be reviewing the film on my channel when it comes out in the UK. But I wasn't overly infused by the prospect of watching yet another Bond film because here's the thing, and I say this at risk of being expelled from the UK as a British citizen, I don't like the character of James Bond. I don't like the character of James Bond. I think he sucks. I think he's appalling. I think he's problematic as hell. He is literally the embodiment of toxic masculinity. But we can get into that into another video because I did in fact sit down and watch a ton of James Bond content so that I could properly articulate some of the issues that I've had with the character. And with that knowledge, I compiled this nice little script so I can make a video talking about the character in particular. And that should be coming up following this video at some point in time, probably on Sunday, maybe on Monday, depending on how long it takes to edit. But since there is going to be an upcoming analysis of James Bond as a character overall, I don't need to go into all of that in this video. We're going to just be focusing on No Time to Die as a film in itself. And then at the very end of this review, I'll be giving you guys my ranking of all of the Daniel Craig James Bond films. But before we get into all of that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on No Time to Die. By the way, this is going to be a non-spoiler review for the most part because I know that majority of you guys won't have seen this film yet, but if you have seen this film, at the very end we're going to be diving into some of the spoilery thoughts that I have. So No Time to Die is directed by Cary Fukunaga, and this film, like I said, is Daniel Craig's swan song as the iconic character of James Bond. It is the final time that we will likely be seeing him in this role, so it was a pretty big deal and there was a lot leading up to this film. Now, unfortunately, because it had to stop and start its whole marketing campaign due to the whole panoramic situation, this film has also racked up quite a bill. So I don't think it's going to be profitable as Daniel Craig's final entry into this franchise, but I do feel like the stakes were quite high in terms of wrapping up this story and this version of the character. I'm sure there was a lot of pressure to ensure that the final entry into this saga would be just as impressive as its first, but ultimately I wouldn't say that it is quite on the same level as Casino Royale or some of the other great entries into this portion of the James Bond franchise. At the same time, I wouldn't say that this film is a disaster. I don't think that this film is one of the worst entries into the franchise by any stretch of the imagination. I think this film is a pretty powerful, emotionally impactful entry into the franchise that gives Daniel Craig a very worthy send-off. So first of all, let's talk about Daniel Craig himself. I think he has been a great Bond. He has been my favorite James Bond, as a matter of fact. And not just because I've had so many issues with the previous Bonds, like it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Like what those other Bonds got, please. I think on his own, Daniel Craig has really stood out as a Bond for the modern day. He really did carve out his own path in terms of his approach for this iconic character, leaving behind a lot of the cheesier and kind of parodied tropes that the franchise became known for, especially in the 90s. And I feel like this has worked overall for the character to kind of reinvent him and ground him a little bit more. I know that there are a bunch of James Bond fans who are a fan of the kind of campiness of the character and how, you know, cheesy it became by the 90s with Pierce Brosnan's iteration of the the character, but I do prefer this more realistic, grounded, you know, dark and gritty version of Bond. And again, I feel like that's yet another example of the franchise adapting to the times and responding to some of its previous issues and criticisms. And also because Daniel Craig's Bond has always been so serious, so grounded, so dark and gritty, it makes the moments where he does crack a smile it makes the moments where he literally just has the teeniest smirk all the more worth it. Like, I feel like they have so much more impact because usually you see him just be so miserable so miserable, so over it. Like, I really feel like you have to earn his smile. I also found myself incredibly impressed by the way that Daniel Craig handles the physicality of this role. Like, I forgot to Google how old he is at this point, although this was filmed a couple of years ago, but like, he has been doing these James Bond films for ages and he's been complaining about it for ages. But the fact of the matter is that he has gotten substantially older since he first signed on for this role in like 2004 or something, and we first saw Casino Royale in 2006. Like, that's literally been, what, 15 years? I think he has the longest tenure as Bond in terms of, you know, just the amount of time from his first to last film. So yeah, like, we have been seeing Bond age on our screen in a way that we haven't seen with previous Bonds. And so I was quite impressed with how he worked with the physical demands of this role. You know, he still is able to deliver on these action sequences, and also as a whole, I forgot how great some of these James Bond action sequences can be. I have to say, like, I genuinely forgot. I've only ever seen 3 James Bond films in cinema. The first one was Quantum of Solace, and for the longest time I thought it was Casino Royale, and that was one of the reasons why I was put off by Bond as a whole, because people would always bang on about how great Casino Royale was, and I was like, I watched that and it was dead. Like, I don't see what you guys were seeing. Like, did we even watch the same film? Well, it turns out we didn't. We literally didn't watch the same film because I had actually seen Quantum of Solace instead of Casino Royale. The second film that I watched in cinema was Spectre, and let me tell you, first of all, that film isn't great, like, it's not wonderful, but also I was sitting right at the front. It was a packed cinema and I'd booked the tickets at the very last minute, and Booby the Fool me sat right at the front, like right next to the screen, her neck just craning up to watch this film. And so, like, I had a personal vendetta against the film just for that fact. Then of course the third James Bond film that I saw was No Time to Die, and this was the first full James Bond experience that I got, and I was really impressed by it. I was really impressed by these action sequences. They looked slick, they looked fast paced and impactful. Like, you really felt a sense of danger, and that's something that I've always found to be lacking in James Bond films of old. Is like, there's no real tension, there's no real stakes there, because everything seems to come so easily for Bond. But here you see Daniel Craig struggling and that was established from the very get-go in Casino Royale with that horrible rope scene, but that's just continued on, the struggling that he has to go through. And another integral part of the James Bond franchise that makes a comeback in this film after being kind of put on the back burner for quite a while post the Brosnan days was the gadgets. Okay, we have the return of these cool gadgets given to Bond by Q. Because of the dark and gritty route that the Daniel Craig iteration of the character took, we didn't really see as many of the goofy gadgets that came to be associated with James Bond. But here in this film, we do get quite a few of them that actually serve a pretty cool purpose, especially with the car. The iconic Aston Martin plays a massive role in one of the action sequences at the beginning of the film, and I think it's really cool. There's this scene, oh, I want to spoil it, but we'll talk about spoilers at the end, but there is this really cool scene with the car. I'm telling you, Daniel Craig as James Bond, I feel like he's unmatched. Like, how can we even compare? And it's tough because, much like with other action franchises like Mission Impossible, there is a feeling that you have to one-up yourself with each entry to try and keep things as fresh and new, as exciting as possible. So it is difficult to get that sense time and time again, especially considering how great some of the other entries into Daniel Craig's run have been. So the fact that I was still watching this film feeling exciting. Feeling the energy radiating off the screen was pretty impressive to me. And also the fact that that was maintained throughout the entirety of the film for the most part. Okay, so setting aside James Bond himself for just a second here, next up let's talk about some of these supporting characters. Starting off with my girl Lashana Lynch. Starting off with my girl, the new 007. Okay, so listen, there was a lot of debate about, you know, oh, a black woman can't be 007, James Bond has to be 007, blah, 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 blah. First of all, she is 007. She's not playing the new James Bond in this film. Like, James Bond is James Bond, but he disappears off to God knows where to live his life after the events of Spectre, and so she takes on the 007 code name. That's all that it is, really, and that is actually a point of contention with the characters in the film. So it is actually a part of the plot. It's not something that they just kind of throw in there for the sake of ticking diversity boxes or whatever the internet was saying when that was announced. Anyway, but aside from all of that controversy that you guys were steeped into, I was just sitting back having a great time with a female character that was done justice in a James Bond film. That's what I was doing. Whilst you guys were embroiled in all of that discussion, I was just sitting back thinking, man, how times have changed. Man, how we've progressed. Because Lashana Lynch is excellent. I already knew this from the trailers, but she's brilliant. Oh my goodness. This is one of the few occasions where we have gotten a female character in a Bond film that can go toe to toe with Bond. She's not belittled in the film. She's not objectified. She's not objectified for a long time. She's not objectified for a substantial amount of time. It's still James Bond after all. Anyways, fine. She is still on an equal level to Bond. She is given the 007 moniker because she's deemed worthy of it by M, and it shows from what we see of her. So I'm just so happy, because not only is she like a black woman, and of course I'm happy to see a black woman in a major franchise, like please, but the form of female representation here is just miles ahead from what we've seen in the franchise in the past, and indeed within the Daniel Craig films as well. So I was just really, really happy to see her be done justice. On the flip side of things though, I have to say, you know, Naomi Harris, Academy Award nominee Naomi Harris, continues to be wasted in this franchise, and quite frankly it's unacceptable. Quite frankly, I can't revel in the success that was Lashana Lynch's character in this film, because I have to think about how Moneypenny was treated in these films as a whole. Like, it just breaks my heart to see Naomi Harris wasted. How do you do that? One character that I think was always done justice and I continue to love is Q. Ben Whishaw as Q, absolutely. What? He's such a delight. He's such a delight, even more so in this final entry. Like, I love Ben Whishaw as Q. I think it's perfect casting. There is something about the character that is kind of revealed in the film, and again, I guess I'll talk about it at the very end, but that was a nice kind of touch, especially considering the toxic elements of this franchise and how previously that never would have been something that they would have included. You can probably guess what I'm trying to say here, but if you can't, again, I'll talk about it later on. We also see a reunion between Daniel Craig and Ana de Armas in this film. Of course, both of the actors were in Knives Out 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago now? Oh my god. Oh my god. But yeah, they were both in Knives Out and they were great, but here we see them again alongside each other. Her role in this film isn't as big as the promo materials would lead you to believe. Like, she really isn't in it that much, but I think she's great when she is. She does kind of fit more into the traditional Bond girl tropes that we've seen time and time time and time and time again, but I feel like it's less offensive because there's a variety of female representation in this film. My issue has always been not with portraying attractive female characters, because there's nothing wrong with attractive women. My issue is with that being the sole kind of representation in this franchise, and also the objectification of these women and the way that they're viewed solely through the male gaze. I I do feel like because we have a variety of female characters represented here, not a huge one, like it's still James Bond, like I say, but because there is a bit more diversity in terms of female representation, it creates a bit more of a comfortable space for this kind of traditional Bond girl character to exist. And then we also get the return of Ralph Fiennes as M. I never thought that he was as good as Judi Dench, if I'm being honest. Like, he's just, you know, he's just kind of a pencil pusher to me. Even though he's proven not to be in the previous films, I just feel like he never really had the same impact as Judi Dench. Like, Dame Judi Dench as M, she was iconic. She was incredible. I feel like it's also because she was M for like my whole life, literally my whole life. So like I've always associated that character with Dame Judi Dench. And like Ralph Fiennes is like doing a fine job, but it's not the same. And also in this film, he like messes up big time. In this film, he's kind of a blundering fool, and that goes back to what I say in my video analyzing James Bond as a character. But one of the aspects of, you know, James Bond is that he always has to be the smartest man in the room, and as a result everyone else needs to be dumber in comparison. And I feel like that's very much the case with M in this film, where he makes these major morally questionable mistakes, and as a result James Bond has to save the day, kind of looking down upon him as like, you idiot, you fool, how could you do this? And he's like, oh, it's in the national interest or whatever. But yeah, you lose respect for M as a result of his actions, and also because he loses his cool and is just so frazzled in this film. Of course, I need to talk about the opening sequence that is an iconic feature of all of the James Bond films. And here, you know, I think it was a pretty cool opening sequence. Like, I can't really judge the opening sequences across all of these James Bond films. Like, I think obviously over time we've seen a decrease in the prevalence of the naked women dancing. Like, that's just such a cringy thing that a lot of these opening sequences have had in the past, but they're still there though. I just want it noted, like, they're still there, okay? And also we need to talk about the song. We need to talk about the James Bond song for the opening sequence. It is of course called No Time to Die, and it is sung by Billie Eilish, and like, mwah, I love it. Like, what did you expect me to say? I love it. I've been listening to this song for over a year because it literally came out last year in anticipation for the release of the film in 2020. But listening to it in the cinema, listening to Billie Eilish's voice in the cinema, and then when she gets to that like big part where she says die, and it's like really long and incredible and impactful, like, that was just magic. I would go back and watch this film just for that section alone. Finally, for my non-spoiler review, let's get into some of the things that I wasn't such a huge fan of. The plot. As is the case oftentimes with a lot of these James Bond films, the plot is like nonsense. The plot is ridiculous. Like, again, we'll talk about it in the spoiler talk section, but the plot is kind of ridiculous. And also, unfortunately, and it genuinely pains me to say this because I'm such a fan, but I really didn't like Rami Malek's villainous character here called Safin. He just didn't work for me, I'm afraid. Like, he really didn't. And I'm so sad because I was really looking forward to seeing him in a James Bond film. But unfortunately, it just didn't work. His backstory was just kind of told to us, but we never really felt the full impact of it. It was supposed to have a very meaningful tie to some of the other characters in the film. Again, we'll talk about it in a second. But unfortunately, that didn't really land. There wasn't really any emotional weight to it because it was just said and never really shown. And also, he suffers from the same issues as a lot of the other Bond villains in that his plot is just so overly convoluted, his motives are so opaque, and he goes for the whole "you and I aren't so different" spiel, which, like, I've had enough of. Abolish this immediately. Abolish this immediately and normalize villains being different from the heroes. Like, I get it, you know, the idea of having, you know, two sides of the same coin, I understand, but we've done it to death now. Like, please, not all of the villains have a ton in common with the heroes, and we've seen this so many times with the Bond franchise, in particular with Daniel Craig's Bond. Like, Spectre was literally about this as well. Why are we doing it again? Overall, I would definitely say that whilst the plot and the villain are definitely definitely the weakest part of this James Bond film. I do feel like it is a nice entry into the franchise, and it is a nice swan song for Daniel Craig's iteration of the character. It has great action sequences that do warrant a trip to the theatre if you can, and I feel like Daniel Craig was able to give it a great last go in terms of his final performance as this character, really having emotional weight to it, really feeling substantial, even though the plot faltered and felt a little bit nonsensical. And also I will say that Cary Fukunaga directed the hell out of this film. Truly, there are some gorgeous sequences in this film. I feel like he made for a great James Bond director, and I wouldn't be surprised if they take him on board again when the franchise is inevitably rebooted. So with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving No Time to Die a 7.5 out of 10. Okay, so now let's get into the spoiler section, the spoiler talk of my review, and I don't really have much to say here other than, first of all, this film revisits the events of Spectre. This is a mistake because I don't remember that film. This is a mistake. Why would you do that? Like, oh, now I have to do homework and remember what Spectre was. Listen, if I wasn't already going to rehash Spectre for my other video analysing James Bond as a character, then I wouldn't have had any clue what happened in that film, and I would have gone into this one almost completely blind. Like, Spectre was just so forgettable to me. Honestly, the most memorable part for me was the first, like 10 minutes with that open action sequence that was just incredible. Was set in like the Dia de los Muertos, and it was just absolutely stunning, and it was shot, I believe, to look like it was one take, almost as like a trial that Sam Mendes did for 1917. But after that, it was just nonsense. Like, after that, I just completely lost interest. The idea that this film would be a direct follow-up to the events of Spectre, I think, is a bit of a mistake. But this franchise, or this portion of the franchise, has kind of done that quite a bit. There are storylines that started off in Casino Royale that have continued on to this final entry of the Daniel Craig films. So all of these entries really have been quite connected, which is an interesting choice considering how long Daniel Craig's tenure as Bond has actually been. The fact that he's still mourning the loss of Vesper after like 15 years, like please, and you knew her for what, like a week? And you've been mourning her for 15 years? Like, I know he fell in love with her and they lived this great life together in Italy and whatever, but 15 years? Secondly, I was also surprised to see that the beginning of this story actually centers on the character of Madeleine, and indeed the entirety of the story focuses on Madeleine, really, because the Bond villain in this entry isn't really Bond's enemy, it's Madeleine's enemy. He's the man who killed her mother in retaliation for Madeleine's father killing his entire family, and he just happened to come from this like incredibly powerful family that had a poison garden that developed this poison to mass produce and blah blah blah, kill the whole world. The plan basically reminded me of Hydra's plan in Captain America the Winter Soldier, where Hydra had this like software where they could just target at everyone who would be a potential threat, except with this kind of technology there's these like nanobots that can attack people with certain DNA sequences, and if you're related to them it will also attack them. Like I said, the plot is incredibly convoluted, his motives aren't very clear. Like, why does he want to kill everyone? Why does he want to kill everyone? Because his family was killed? Why? Restoring the world order or something, I guess. I will say though, in terms of his final act of damning Bond to never be able to go near his family ever again, that was pretty boss. That was pretty, I have to tip my hat off to him. That was a pretty boss move. What a way to go. Anyways, back to Madeleine. I had some questions when it came to her character. First of all, why on earth was she the therapist for Blofeld? Who allowed that to happen? She was way too close to the situation. Who allowed that to happen? And I know that they say like Blofeld only spoke to her. But this idea that she would be the only person to be able to communicate with Blofeld as his therapist, No, I'm not buying that even for a second. Like, that was just ridiculous to me. And also, like, when did she become so skilled in therapy that she was allowed to, you know, communicate with one of the most dangerous people on the planet? Like, when did that actually happen? And then, of course, you have the big reveal that Madeleine had James Bond's daughter. And, like, at first she says, you know, she's not yours, but you can see her blue eye. Oh my God, that little girl had the bluest eyes. Like, you could actually believe that she would be Daniel Craig's daughter. I also had some questions when it came to that storyline, because here's the thing. When it comes to James Bond, of course, there's a lot of objectification of women, and he sees women as just, you know, these showpieces, just these accessories for him to hold on his arms, especially in the early iterations of the character. In the case of Daniel Craig's iteration of the character, he has fallen in love with quite a few women, but they've ended up betraying him, as is the case here, or at least he believes, with Madeleine. And that all started off with Vesper in Casino Royale. So this idea of women being traitors is something that is perpetuated across all of these James Bond entries. But for every James Bond, there's always a woman that he kind of falls for more than the others. The woman that he actually becomes invested in, like the chosen one, if you will. And that chosen one tends to, you know, betray him and all of that. But in this case, and in the case of Madeleine, like, he actually has a daughter with her. And it's supposed to be this kind of emotionally profound element to the story, this idea that, like, he would make the final sacrifice for the family that he was never allowed to have. In my mind, I'm thinking, like, he was never there. Why didn't they allow him to be with his family and then take him away from the equation? The idea that he would get to know this little girl for, like, literally 12 hours, not even a full 24, 12 hours. And sure, the fact that he knows that she is his daughter would bring about this parental sense of protectiveness in him, I guess. But I feel like it would have made more sense if we had scrapped the whole betrayal element of everything and just allowed them to be a family for 5 years, for him to have developed a bond with his daughter for the 5 years, having participated in raising her. Imagine that. Imagine a James Bond who actually participates in caregiving. Like, what if you really want to talk about being progressive, right? Going against all of the tropes that James Bond has perpetuated in the past and actually showing him being a loving, present father figure. Then afterwards, when Safin re-enters Madeleine's life and prevents James from ever being able to touch either of his loved ones, it has so much more of an emotional impact. It has so much more emotional weight to it because he has raised his daughter. He loves Madeleine. Maybe he's married to her. Maybe this is his family and it's been taken away from him, and that's why he has literally lost the will to live by the end and is willing to make the ultimate sacrifice by blowing himself up alongside Safin's base. And finally, I did just also want to mention that it's great to see that Q was confirmed to be an LGBTQ character. Perhaps he's a gay character, but that's not really clarified. He seems to have a male date, but that doesn't guarantee that he is gay. But, you know, considering that Ben Whishaw is gay in real life, I feel like that was nice to have that kind of representation in the franchise. Like I said, it hasn't been traditionally seen, and in fact a lot of what we do see from James Bond counters any kind of progressiveness because he embodies toxic masculinity, as I said. But it was a very quick blink and you'll miss it moment, and some people may not even notice. It may even be edited out in some countries, unfortunately, but still, at least I know that Q is an LGBTQ character, and you know, that's great for the franchise. And finally, it's time to give you guys my official ranking of the Daniel Craig James Bond films. I'm not going to be going through my thoughts on them, like it's just going to be a list, unfortunately, because we don't have time. Okay, but at number 5 we have Quantum of Solace, at number 4 we have Spectre, at number 3 we have No Time to Die, at number 2 we have Skyfall, and number 1 is Casino Royale. Yes, Casino Royale still to this day is the best Daniel Craig James Bond film in my opinion, although I will say I think it's a very close tie between Casino Royale and Skyfall. There are elements of both films that I really like and really dislike, so I would say they're almost at the same level, but the only thing that gives Casino Royale a little bit of an edge is that rope sequence. But that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on No Time to Die, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this film down in the comments below, and what's your ranking of the Daniel Craig James Bond films. I'd love to hear. Please be sure to subscribe to catch you videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.